I think there are several conclusions that we can get out of the latest round. First, the Palestinians have never been more united than today. This does not only apply to the Palestinians under occupation in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza, but also in the Palestinians who are today citizens of Israel. Never before has the Palestinians been so united, not only against the occupation, but against what many have termed as apartheid policies by the Israeli state against its own Palestinian citizens. With the passage of the Jewish nation law 2 years ago. That is a formula that is new and that will be noted. The second question is that the issue of the violation of rights that the Israeli state has done, again, whether against occupied people or against its own Palestinian citizens, is no longer being ignored by the international community. Today, we have major think tanks like Carnegie, major news outlets, major human rights organizations that have called these practices by Israel as apartheid practices. This was unthinkable only a few years ago. And third, the notion that normalization with Arab states can replace coming to terms with the Palestinians has been proven wrong by these recent events. Today, it is clear that unless the Israelis and the Palestinians are able to reach a peace agreement amongst them, regardless of any number of agreements that are reached with the outer Arab world, that peace will not come to this region. The Palestinian Arabs that are today citizens of Israel are being an increasing force among the Palestinian community. They are citizens of Israel that are supposed to have full citizens, and yet they are being discriminated against by their own state. Israel is not going to be able, despite its effort over the years to divide the Palestinian community, those under occupation from the Palestinian Arabs that are Israeli citizens, and even those under occupation, to try to divide the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank. Today, all these efforts seem to have failed, and you have a united and strong Palestinian force that in numbers is more than the number of Israeli Jews. And Israel is not going to be able from now on to ignore the collective force that all these Palestinians will have in a way that will, in my view, affect the overall solution to the conflict in ways that we have not seen before. The United States is not going to be able to use its old toolbox to manage the conflict. It is becoming clear that going back to trying to manage the conflict through pacifying the situation is not going to work anymore. This is not a tit for tat. This is not an Israel-Hamas war. This is a war by an occupation force with immense force against an occupied people. And this is a situation, once again, in which international community is no longer willing to ignore the gross violations of human rights by Israel. And therefore, the United States is not going to be able to do things in a business as usual manner as before. We at Carnegie have called for the United States to adopt a rights-based approach that no matter what the outcome of the conflict is, still treats people equally, Palestinians and Israelis. And it's becoming clear that one cannot wait for a political solution before the application of equal rights to both Palestinians and Israelis is affected. This is what we are dealing with. And in my view, the international community will no longer be able to manage the situation as it did before.